Last but not least is Pat Martens. He's the Chief Executive at Bridge Preservation and Inspection Services. He's going to be presenting on behalf of Hydro Technologies, talking about bridge deck hydro-demolition case studies. Pat, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Dick. I'm going to talk a little bit about hydro-demolition and some of the various ways it's being used around the country. I kind of put this little chart together here. This is kind of something I went through and kind of manually did, kind of looking through past letting data back through about 2013 for the various states. And this is what I kind of uncovered as far as who was doing the most hydro-demolition as far as I could determine through the letting information there. So you can see there's a few Midwestern states on there, Ohio, Indiana, they're big players in the hydro-demolition industry. You see Illinois is another big one on there, Michigan. Those are kind of the top ones. Missouri a little bit towards the bottom there, but just kind of gives you an idea how much work is being done in that area with square yard values there. So just a little rough graph there. Just takes some of those top Midwestern states and kind of shows you the trend of how that was kind of been running here since 2013, and this goes out through 2019. I haven't added in the 21 data yet into that spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you about a variety of applications from various DOTs. And you'll probably notice most of these on here are not Western or Midwestern partnership areas necessarily, but I think the lessons there are still valid for everybody there. We have a variety of what we call case studies out there. I don't know if they're truly case studies, but that's kind of what we label them as, where we have some reports written up with regard to these DOTs, except for the Nashville and the Columbus projects. Those were just videos we had put together on some projects. But the other ones we actually have some written reports on, and BASF had helped assemble a couple of these. So if you are interested in more detail and specifics on some of these studies here that I'm just going to very briefly touch on, stop by the Hydro Technologies booth, and we have copies of those we can give to you. I'm going to start off kind of with a tale of two agencies, and some of you may be able to relate to this. We have, I've got PennDOT and Arkansas I've kind of called out here. And basically PennDOT, I say the old guard, they've been doing hydro-demolition a long, long time, probably as much as, as far back as anybody has been doing it. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, those are a couple other states, but did a little bit of a study here with the Pittsburgh district, looking at how they go about their process with hydro-demolition. And then I've also noted Arkansas, kind of a newer player. They never really got into the hydro-demolition market until about 2012, and it actually came through working with the partnership here. As far as PennDOT, you can kind of see with the pie chart there, just kind of shows you they're basically kind of running fairly uniform year in, year out. They're just continually pumping out work. Go back to 2013, but they've done work well back into the early part of the 2000s. And some of the findings there, it's kind of what we know about hydro-demolition. It provides a very good roughened surface with an increased amplitude, and that aids in adding a lot more surface area for your overlay to be able to grab to. Hydro-demolition basically is going to find all the bad spots in the deck for you. You don't have to worry about even sounding out those areas. The machine's going to do a total surface application and selectively find all those areas for you. And it allows the overlay to be attached in a monolithic fashion. Some of the things from the PennDOT study, and they've kind of called some of these things out, they feel like they've perfected their calibration through the years. That's the one good thing about agencies that have been doing the work for a long time out there. If you're an agency that has not been using hydro-demolition or you'd like to get into it, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just kind of check in with some of these old guard DOTs out there. They'll give you some good guidance on specifications. They do allow for a combination of milling and hydro-demolition in the removal process. What they find with the process is it's going to be much more effective in removing the deteriorated or weakened concrete than you're going to get with just conventional jackhammering. So they feel like there's just that added confidence that you're going to get a much longer lasting overlay. And basically, they feel it's just cheap insurance to ensure you're going to get a better bond out there. It's just a look at one of the big bridges in the Pittsburgh area, and this is covered in latex concrete. Now, as far as Arkansas, like I said, 2012 was their first adventure with Hydro-Demolition. They worked on a Highway 38 project out over the White River, but they quickly found that they had a very good pairing with latex modified concrete and the Hydro-Demolition process. This is a look at that Route 38 bridge out there, and they're using what we call a fast track cut, very shallow cut. You can see some of the rebar exposure there. Whoops, kind of passed through that pretty quick, and there's the kind of the finished product there at that particular bridge. But they feel like that early success they were able to gain on that first project then jump-started them to be able to now use that process very effectively in their bridge maintenance program. And this is a look at what they've been doing since 2012. They started out a couple years there with some nice projects. Then they had a little bit of a lull, but part of that was they were just getting their bridge maintenance program organized. And so then they really started pumping out some projects, and then just the general trajectory through the last 8 to 10 years here has been generally on an upward pattern. They're from 2012 to 19, I think they had done about 200 bridges, but just in the last couple of years, they're probably up to close to 300 bridges since the inception of their program. So think about that. You know, a lot of these are probably NBI 5 and 6 bridge decks that they've been able to work on, and instead of allowing a fair percentage of those to drop down in deficient status, they've been able to cut that off and basically improve their condition. And so now, you know, the amount of bridges that are falling into deficient status due to the deck condition has dropped significantly in Arkansas. I want to talk briefly about Shreveport. This is out on I-20. And it's pretty interesting. I went down to Shreveport over the summer to visit with the district bridge engineer, fairly new gentleman there. And I was telling him I was there to look at some bridges along I-20, and he was kind of curious what I wanted to look at. And I said, well, you know, you've got some of the very first bridges that were ever done in Louisiana with Hydro-Demolition and latex concrete. And he had no idea. Back in 1997, the department had a project to use Hydro-Demolition. It was a deep cut job, and it was including microsilica concrete overlay. And while on site, the contractor approached the DOT and said, hey, we want to show you this process we think can really benefit your state. And it was so that they took the ramp adjoining the bridge there over the main structure, and they did a fast track Hydro-Demolition with a latex modified concrete, and they actually used the early strength version, and that was done in 1997. So I was out there this past summer and was looking at those bridges, and in addition, the bridges I've got circled in red there, those are bridges that were done in 2000. So I was able to walk all those decks and take a look at the condition of all those bridge decks out there that were done over the last 21 to 24 years or so. This is a look at that demo bridge that was done in 1997, and the surface after 24 years basically looks pretty nice still. You do basically have minor surface wear and some general transverse cracking, but nothing of any significance. So this is some of the approach structure to the Red River, various ramps in there, some of the grade separations. I think there was about 21 bridges, something like that, in the 2000 project. And so they've got a very good testimonial there, I think, for the use of the fast-track Hydro-Demolition process there. I'm going to jump over to Virginia. Virginia's got a pretty interesting program. They do a lot of what we call on-call contracting with Hydro-Demolition and latex. And in particular, I visited the Stanton district and looked at some of their bridges and talked to their bridge engineer out there. And the I-81 corridor is a very congested, heavily traveled corridor out there, and they have a hard time getting out there and doing much work without disrupting the traffic. So basically, their philosophy is you can only work at night. And so they basically set up an on-call contract along the corridor there that only allows the contractor to come out at 7 p.m. and he's got to be off the road at 6 a.m. And they do allow some cold milling a day or two ahead of time to get the initial surface off, and they'll have some transitional pavement in there. But if you look on the, let's see, the right side of the photo, you can kind of see the patched out deck there. That would be the before picture. And then on the left side, you can see the finished surface. So they're using a fast track cut. Again, for these overnight type projects, you basically have to use a fast track cut. You're not going to be able to deep cut. There's just no way you can get any production. You're essentially looking at about 200 to 250 square yards per night on a good night. But the contract's set up as a one-year contract, and they have the option to renew for a second and then a third year if both parties are agreeable to it. Well, it's going to use a very early strength latex mix, which allows for traffic in 3 hours, but it gives them great flexibility in the district. A lot of it's all tied to their operations budget, essentially. So, if they have a good year and they have enough money flowing through their operations budget, they'll be able to do more bridge decks. The last contract they let in 2018 was for $5 million. Hydro-Demolition ran about $78 per square yard. And then the placing of the early strength latex was at $75, and then the actual material cost is about $1,000 per square yard, or cubic yard in this particular contract. And I think they just let the 21 contract this year. But the other districts in Virginia are also doing on-call type contracting as well. I think the Stanton district, though, is probably a little more progressive in what they do. They're pretty progressive in a lot of areas in that particular district. So pretty neat way to do hydro latex. There's a look at a finished job there. Got a video here. I'm just going to show you a quick clip of this. This was out in Nashville. It's a weekend-only job, and it was 4 weekends, about 10,000 square yards of bridge deck, so about 2,500 square yards per weekend. And I'll just run a little bit of the clip. You can kind of see what they're doing here. There is the first step is the mechanical milling. And then they'll move into the hydro-demolition. And then the cleanup and the overlay placement. But pretty impressive. 2,500 square yards per weekend. I would imagine they probably use 2 hydro-demolition robots out there for that, because usually you're looking at about 1,000 or so per robot. 1,000, 1,200, maybe somewhere in there. But when you have time is very restrictive, you only have a short window to work in, boy, there's really nothing that can beat this process as far as being able to get all your deteriorated concrete out and then get the overlay on all at the same time. I'm going to jump off of that one because I want to get to this Columbus job as well. This was another weekend job, and this was 2 weekends. So basically what they did here is they were working 1 lane in each direction during 1 weekend. So they're milling in the first bridge there. And then when they get done milling on that first bridge, they jump over to the second bridge and mill going back the other way. And then they can begin the hydro-demolition on that first bridge as they're milling on the second bridge. And again, this is a fast track cut, so they're basically, for these particular bridges, I think they were inlaying on those, so they're basically milling down probably about 1.25 to 1.5 inches, and then they're going in with a fast track hydro-demolition cut, which would be about 1/2 inch is generally what they would specify on those. And then they'll inlay back with the overlay material, so you don't have to change the height of your expansion devices. You don't have to adjust your approaches or anything like that. So it's just a strict inlay. Does require a good wet burlap cure, and that's one of the things about latex concretes is you want a good saturated surface, dry surface to apply the overlay over, and then you want good wet burlap curing, and that polyethylene is important to keep the moisture locked in during that wet cure period. So 2 weekends, both those bridges then were completely rehabilitated. Basically about 48 hours or so. Local agencies, I want to touch briefly on this because what we're seeing is, a lot of local agencies kind of follow the lead of the state DOTs, it seems like. Interesting, in Alabama, we haven't had a lot of success working in Alabama with the DOT, but what we've been finding is some of the local agencies there have kind of grasped the process. So we had 2 county jobs there recently. One was out in Jackson County, Alabama. Basically, they had they had a structure there that they anticipated a replacement was probably going to cost them in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million. The real issue was their bridge deck, though. So essentially, they went from a large investment into a new bridge into basically just rehabbing what they had. They did have a total closure on that particular structure, which helped to expedite the work. The St. Clair County project followed right behind that. That actually used a very early strength mix because they wanted to essentially get things done very quickly. So they elected to go to weekend work. And the hydro price was a little high there. It was about $150 per square yard. So you actually, you do pay for the premium of that work there. So you can see the total project costs there on the St. Clair County job. That ran about $400,000 or so. And there were actually 2 bridges in that particular project. The thing we noticed was in working with the counties there and the success they had with it, it's actually sparked some interest from the DOT now. So we're actually seeing the DOT now looking at a couple projects, form fast track hydro on with the rapid setting latex. Seems like more and more agencies are kind of jumping on board with the rapid set latex because of the advantages of getting in there quickly and getting out of the way. And the last one I'm going to touch on is just the Maryland Transportation Authority, just basically plug tolling agencies. Maryland is a big player in hydro-demolition. They had a recent project on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. This utilized utilized the conventional LMC with the Type 1 cement. Kind of gives you an idea. This was the tunnel there at Baltimore. That was all done with hydro-demolition and latex modified concrete. So Maryland Tolling Agency, they're a big player in the hydro-demolition market. Illinois Tollway, they're also pretty big. So there's several of the tolling agencies out there that have kind of gravitated to the process. So just to kind of summarize a few quick points. There are agencies in a variety of stages with their programs. We've got a number of states that have been doing hydro-demolition for 25 years. They do it exclusively for any deck rehab. We've got agencies that have just started to get into it. There's some of your agencies out there are not into it. I guess I would kind of compare you to the jackhammer. The jackhammer's basically 19th century technology. And we're still using it in a lot of states for some reason when we've got better technology out there to do what we need to do and do it very economically. I kind of compare it to basically the rotary phone and your smartphone. Would you still be using a rotary phone even though you got the smartphone out there? I don't think too many people have rotary phones out there anymore, but that's kind of what the comparison is here. You've got good technology, and it's there for you to use, and it's very efficient. It's a great tool. What I find with hydro-demolition, it's a great tool for a variety of conditions. You can use it on your better decks for pure preservation. A lot of what we see is for bridge decks that are in that NBI 5-6 range. Very good for that because you get a lot of selective removal out of the existing deck. And then sometimes we even see it being used on the poorer decks. Sometimes not by design, it's just when you get out there it's a lot worse than what you realize. So you have a wide range of conditions that the hydro-demolition surface prep is able to handle for you out there. The overnight and the weekend work seems to be growing and growing across the country. People want you in and out as fast as you can. Weekends is very popular, but now we're even starting to see more and more agencies wanting to get you in and out of there overnight. So it just gets more and more restrictive, it seems like. And you have to use basically that fast track type cut to be able to achieve that. And then local agencies, toll authorities, it applies to all of them out there, so it's a great tool. And then I'll just leave you with a little philosophical thought there. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. Sometimes you just got to be on the cusp and try things and get out there.
Thanks, Pat. Pat, a round of applause. Thanks so much.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.